Buenos dias. Oh, live streamed. Okay. Happy Dwadasi. Dwadasi is the stepmother of devotion. In the Nectar of Devotion, it says that Ekadashi is the mother of devotion. But I think Dwadasi is the stepmother. Nice to break fast. Jai Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavala Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Gopi Jannavalabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Gopi Jannavalabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Jaya Girivaradari Jai Gopi Jannavalabha Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Girivaradari Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jaya Yashodanandana Jaya Jaya Brajajanaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Kunja Bihari Jamuna Tira Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Jaya Kunja Bihari. Shri Radha Damodar Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramhamsa Vivajakacharya Satar Shri Srimad Divine Grace. Shri the A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Shri the Prabhupada Ki Jai. Kantra Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bo. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 4th canto. The chapter is 29. It's a real marathon chapter, huh? But we're so fortunate that Narada Muni takes time to explain his explanation. And the text is number 75. Anena purusho dehan upadate vimunchati harsham shokam bhayam dukham sukham chanena vindati. Anena purusho dehan upadate vimunchati harsham shokam bhayam dukham sukham chanena vindati. Anena purusho dehan upadate vimunchati harsham shokam bhayam dukham sukham chanena vindati. Synonyms are anena, by this process; purusha, the living entity; dehan, gross bodies; upadate, achieves; vimunchati, gives up; harsham, enjoyment; shokam, lamentation; bhayam, fear; dukham, unhappiness; sukham, happiness; cha, also; anena, by the gross body; vindati, enjoys. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Prabhupada Ki Jai. By virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. So this is a concept everyone should be very familiar with by now. Prabhupada does not miss any opportunity to remind us that we're not the body. So even though this is familiar, we should know that it's repeated because we really need to hear it. So let's still try to be attentive to the points here. You're not the body is changing, but we shouldn't assume that we really got it yet. Purport. According to this explanation, one can clearly understand that originally the living entity was as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his pure spiritual existence. Wow. However, when the mind becomes polluted by desires for sense gratification in the material world, the living entity drops into the material conditions, as explained in this verse. Now, that is the origin of the bloop term in ISKCON. Is that right, Tarika Prabhu? The bloop term comes from the sound of dropping into the water. If you drop something, it makes a little bloop. I think that's correct.
Yes, that is correct. It's supposed to be that sound.
So all glory to Srila Prabhupada for very expertly helping us to understand with visual and audio reference, and also making it a joy to understand the bloop sound. Of course, it's not a joy to bloop. But at least we can understand this, this explanation here, that we drop into material conditions when we are polluted by desire for sense gratification. You fall down and you drop in, bloop. But not even a big splash. We're not so significant. Instead, it's just a little bloop. So thus he begins his material existence, which means that he transmigrates from one body to another and becomes more and more entangled in material existence. The process of Krishna consciousness, by which one always thinks of Krishna, is the transcendental process by which one can revert to his original spiritual existence. Devotional service means always thinking of Krishna. Manmana bhava madbhakto vadyaji mam namaskaru mami vaishyasi satyam te pratijani priyosime. This is a verse from the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, text number 65, although Krishna says something very similar at the end of the 9th chapter as well, Manmana bhava madbhakto. So it's an important statement because Krishna says it twice. He says, always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. One should always engage in the Lord's devotional service as recommended in the Archana Marga. One should worship the deity in the temple and constantly offer obeisances to the spiritual master and the deity. These processes are recommended to one who actually wants to become free from material entanglement. Modern psychologists can study the actions of the mind, thinking, feeling, and willing, but they are unable to go deep into the matter. This is due to their lack of knowledge and to their not being associated with a liberated acharya. Interesting. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, text number 2, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshayo viduhu sakalaneha mahata yoganashtaha parantapa. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time, the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Guided by so-called psychologists and philosophers, people in the modern age do not know the activities of the subtle body, and thus cannot understand what is meant by the transmigration of the soul. In these matters, we have to take the authorized statements of Bhagavad Gita. We should all know this verse. Chapter 2, text number 13. Dehinosmin yata dehe kumaram yovanam jara tata dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. Unless all human society understands this important verse in Bhagavad Gita, civilization will advance in ignorance, not in knowledge. Another explosive statement from Srila Prabhupada to conclude, unless all human society understands this important verse in Bhagavad Gita, civilization will advance in ignorance, not in knowledge. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Jnana Timarandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavams Cham Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Param Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Scha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhana Sutta Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Ganadhara, Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So the verse again is a statement that we should all be very familiar with. Narada Muni is saying that by virtue of the processes of the subtle body, the living entity develops and gives up gross bodies. You might recall it being said that like a tree before dying produces a seed, which will grow into another tree. Similarly, our subtle body is the cause of the next gross body. This is known as the transmigration of the soul. Thus, the soul becomes subjected to different types of so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. So, do you consider yourself a subject? We are in the modernized age of democracy where nobody is a subject of some monarch, and we like to think that it's so much better. But we are subjects. We are subjected to so-called happiness, unhappiness, enjoyment, lamentation, fear. We're subjected at all times because of the body, because of a body that was caused by the processes of the subtle body, because of the mind thinking, feeling, willing in so many ways. We become attached to a particular type of bodily situation. Krishna says that thus the living entity takes on a different kind of body and quits another one, carrying different conceptions from one to another as the air carries an aroma. So our subtle body carries the conception of what is happiness, what is distress to the next body. And then we get a whole new situation with a different set of eyes or ears, nose or tongue, tactile sense. And then we enjoy a totally different set of sense objects and we think this is what life is all about. It's just so clear. It's just so self-evident to my material senses, which I'm subjected to, that the whole purpose of my life is to try to gratify these senses. And we think that the desires that I have in my body are so important that everybody should recognize them. Everybody should pay attention to them. In fact, even Krishna should drop what he's doing in Goloka Vrindavan and be very concerned with my desires of my body. And every single living entity thinks like that. The humans have their sophisticated desires and the animals are a bit more straightforward. The pig is also thinking, this stool that I'm about to eat is just so important. It's so significant. I should push aside all of my competitors in the pig pen and eat this stool first. I should fight for my right to dine on this fecal matter. And the pig thinks in a way that is no different from us, that this is what I want, this is what I need, this is what's so important. When we're going to recognize that we are subjected to so-called enjoyment, lamentation, fear, happiness, and unhappiness. Just like the pig. We look at a pig and we think, such pity. I was once in Costa Rica. Was it Costa Rica or Brazil? I think it was in Costa Rica. I was there with the Boy Scouts, believe it or not, Boy Scouts of America. And we saw these pigs in a pen. The pigs are being fed coca leaves. They make cocaine from. And they would feed coca leaves to these pigs so that their stomachs, so that they would kind of become numb. And the pigs wouldn't know when to stop eating. They didn't have a feeling like I'm full now. So they would just eat constantly. And they'd sprinkle in some more coca leaves. And the pigs would just eat. And they're huge, like almost the size of a horse. Massive, massive pigs. And of course, then the owner would slaughter them, eat them. So we would look at this creature and feel pity. Oh, it's subjected to abuse. These owners are just trying to take advantage of its body and feeding it the coca leaves just so that it will eat more and become fat. And then the owner will slaughter it and eat it. Such pity, such woe. But we don't see how we're not much different. Just as that pig is subjected to desire to eat. We're subjected to the desires of this body, like under some cruel monarch. such that when we see the object of the senses, we become hijacked, terrorized. When are we going to recognize it's not such a glorious thing to have a body? It's embarrassing. And that's why we have to hear these statements again and again and again. So let's not just switch off just because we've heard you're not the body a million times. It's very, very important. In fact, as Srila Prabhupada says, unless we understand this, human civilization will advance in ignorance, not in knowledge. And that's really tangible and evidential. Human society, human civilization, if we can call it that, has advanced in ignorance for some time now. And we can say confidently that a large part of that misdirection of civilization, the place where we went off course, is very much owing to an advancement of the philosophy that you are the body, especially as is propounded by Darwin and his ilk, when they became very confident that there's nothing but bodies. Pretty bold statement to make. There are only bodies, and you are nothing but the body, and your body is just this beautiful disaster, a grotesque accident, a mistake, a series of mistakes, millions and millions of mistakes, actually. And that therefore, there's nothing particularly special or significant about you. Your body has very little potential except to just produce some other bodies and to kill some other bodies. So when they put forward this philosophy, of course, at the time, maybe they weren't thinking so deeply about that philosophical import. But they did put forward this philosophy, and it caught on with some people for a couple of different reasons. The reasons we could argue historically why it caught on at the time. I will just say this, that around the same time, there was a division in America between the North and the South, whereas Southern people, they held on to a particular idea about who should be on the top of the food chain and who should be servants of the others, or slaves of the others, to be explicit. And the then vice president of this fledgling confederacy of the southern US states actually wrote this manifesto about how they were certain that they should maintain the old ways of keeping slavery and progressing their civilization in that way. And his justification was actually in reference to what he called the new science that has come out of England. He wrote this manifesto, encouraging his southern brethren to hold true to the idea of white supremacy in reference to what he called the new science coming out of England. And that new science, which only a few years earlier had been published, was Darwin's Origin of Species. So it had a pretty strong political import also for some people, this idea that you're just the body, and that there's only the fight for survival, there's only reproduction. And so to that ends, anything goes, even if it means exploitation of another person. So we can say that that was one of the pivotal points towards advancing in ignorance and not in knowledge. And it's tragic. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada was very opposed, adamantly opposed to this Darwinian idea. He spoke out about it a lot. Apparently, he said something to the effect that the more you stomp on Darwin's face, the more you worship Radha and Krishna. Is that right, Tarika Prabhu? If you could confirm that statement, because I don't recall seeing it in writing, but it does sound Prabhupada-esque. The more you stomp on Darwin's face, the more you worship Radha and Krishna. I'm sure he didn't mean literally.
I don't recall that specific statement, but that is typical of Srila Prabhupada's statements.
I'd have to look it up. I think I know who might have the reference on hand. But we know without a doubt that Srila Prabhupada was very critical of this Darwinian theory of evolution. And for this reason, it is the polar opposite of our philosophy, dehinosmin yata dehe. Yes, the body is changing, but the soul, tata dehantara, Deha antara, that which is in the soul, is moving from one body to the next. A sober person can see this. A person who is not sober is infatuated with this idea that I'm just the body and I can do and I should do anything with my body to enjoy and to conquer over others. So this whole thing about you're not the body is very, very important. It has individual implications and societal implications. And that's why we must give full attention to trying to understand every time Srila Prabhupada brings it up. We shouldn't just pass our eyes over the page and think, yeah, I've heard this. Dehinos Minyata. Yeah, I know this one. In fact, let me just skip ahead a bit. No. There's a reason why Srila Prabhupada is always referencing this. It is the line of demarcation between real spiritual philosophy and materialistic ignorance, is the understanding that you are not this body, that we are transmigrating from one to another. And that the crux of that transmigration, the engine of that action, is the mind, the subtle desires of the mind, the karma, which is carried around like the air carries an aroma. And that's where the scientists are really lacking. That's the part that even they will admit. They will say with such confidence that we've evolved from the mud, even though the only random mutations we ever actually see are detrimental ones. Still, they'll claim just by random mutations in the process of copying of genetic material. That's how all the different varieties of bodies come about. Even though in practical observation, the only types of mutations we ever see are detrimental ones. We never, ever see in observation beneficial mutations. Ever. But whatever, I won't get into that. There's still a reason why they think that's still evidence that all bodies have evolved from random mutation, but I don't want to get into that right now. So these modern scientists, they'll claim with a lot of confidence that the body has evolved from random mutation, and they dissect and break down into smaller and smaller parts the body and try to give some bottom-up explanation for its existence, for its features. But what they will all admit readily is a total lack of understanding of the nature of the mind, the consciousness. Most scientists will readily admit we have no idea. According to their theory of evolution, of course, consciousness must have evolved from the mud, from the gunk, somehow or other. Some sort of combination of matter has caused it to become self-aware. And obviously, this is very fantastical thinking, but besides that, is very philosophically naive, very illogical, because the whole theory of evolution is that we're only fit for survival. The whole purpose of the body, the whole purpose of this machine of evolution is so that one entity can survive long enough to reproduce. It's not necessarily fit for intelligence, for understanding something in full. The whole purpose of evolution is simply survival, not to know truth. Let me quote some people for you, some popular materialistic atheistic scientists. They say that consciousness evolves through natural selection, but then if it does evolve through natural selection from the mud, does it really work very well? This is the issue. Steven Pinker, a famous materialist, he says that our brains were shaped for fitness. That's their term for successful reproduction, not for understanding truth. This is the evolution theory. Our brain is only evolved for fitness, for successful reproduction, not for understanding truth. Patricia Churchland, UC San Diego, the naturalist philosopher, says evolution selects for survival, and truth, whatever that is, definitely takes the hindmost. Richard Dawkins, we all know Richard Dawkins, the outspoken Richard Dawkins. He says that the brains have evolved to understand the behavior of an extremely narrow range of medium-sized objects traveling at medium velocities, and to understand anything else, he says, is simply a wonder. So this idea that your consciousness has evolved from matter is self-defeating. It's self-defeating. If it has evolved from matter, then it is not designed for truth. And if it is not designed for truth, how can we be certain of the theory of evolution? The only thing that they will accept for certain is that it must have come from matter, even though we know for a fact that it cannot be very good. Consciousness cannot be designed to understand the truth. The only thing we can know for sure is that it has evolved from matter. So, as is the case with most materialistic philosophies, it is circular reasoning and self-defeating. It's very problematic to have this idea that consciousness has come from matter. And of course, there isn't the slightest bit of material experimentation to back that up. Not even the slightest bit. But still, it's taught to every single school kid in America from grade 3 that you are this body and that you have evolved from lizards or something. That's where the whole lizard people thing comes from. Now it makes sense. You've evolved from lizards, and that your consciousness is just kind of this evolutionary mistake, and it's not very good. It's only good for procreation and conquering over somebody else. And that's how, that's what children are taught, that this is who you are. I remember even in elementary school, when we were taught about the theory of evolution, they didn't go deeply into what that implies. Like, so what does that mean about your identity and your personality or your purpose, your goal in life, your value? They didn't get into what that implies, but they made very clear explicitly that you're just a mud monster. Of course, I remember acutely that all of the evidences that they had for evolution when I was in school have now all completely changed. When I was in school, it was all about Lucy. Lucy was the missing link, this one fossil that they found somewhere. They're saying, oh, this shows the missing link between the apes and the humans. And now that's totally thrown out. There's the Pinkerton man, another supposed to be missing link fossil. That's also totally thrown out. So everything that they told me was the absolute truth when I was in public school, elementary school, middle school, even in high school. All of that's been completely revised, but it was the absolute truth when they told it to me. But now there's a new absolute truth. That's how materialistic science works. It's the absolute truth, even though it's always changing. So what isn't taught to children, of course, is what that implies. That if your identity is simply just matter, if you're just this body, what purpose do you have except whatever you make for yourself? Sounds poetic, sounds like something you can put on your refrigerator or Facebook post. Your purpose is what you make for yourself. But this is advancement in ignorance. You didn't make your body. You think that the purpose is just whatever comes from this body, but you didn't make your body. You were forced into it. So actually, even if you make the claim that your purpose is just whatever you make for yourself, for your body, well, then that's not really yourself. It's something you were forced upon. There is an objective purpose for this body. Death. So it is all ignorance. We have to recognize that Prabhupada has declared a war against the bodily concept of life, and for good reason. It is nothing but ignorance. And we must fight back, both individually and collectively. You must understand that you are not the body. That process by which we can always know that we are not the body is Krishna consciousness. Manmana bhava mad bhakto madhyaji mam namaskuru. Mamivaishasi tatyam te pratijani priyosime. We have to think of Krishna. How is it that thinking of Krishna helps us to understand that we're not the body? For many people, their religion is reinforcing a bodily concept of life, unfortunately. They think that my religion is an ethnic identity or racial identity or national identity, and that my religion also endows me with the right to be superior to other bodies. For many people, their bodily concept is reinforced by religion. So how is Krishna consciousness different? We think of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Conscious Entity, the origin of consciousness, Paramatma, the Parama Purusha. And we understand that our being and our consciousness is a result of the Supreme Consciousness. The flaw of the materialistic scientists is that they try this bottom-up approach to life. They think that by breaking everything down to its smallest pieces, we'll have we'll see the whole puzzle. We'll put all those pieces together and that we can explain everything that's more complex and abstract with reference to the smaller, tinier pieces, the forces between the atoms, or now there's the quarks and the neutrinos and every little thing. And as soon as we have some device that can blow up quarks and neutrinos, we'll find there's another million little things inside those. But this is the flaw of the materialistic scientists. They try this reductionist method that by reducing to smaller and smaller particles, smaller pieces of the puzzle, we'll start to understand the whole picture. But this is not the approach in the yoga literature. The yoga literature is a top-down. We understand that the origin of everything is the most abstract. It is not that the abstract things in life, consciousness, justice, love, brotherhood, purpose, meaning, truth, these things do not evolve from smaller particles. It's quite the opposite. That is the abstract and lofty concepts which form the gross bodies of matter and the simpler things. Simpler things come from complex things, not the other way around. So the most complex and abstract and non-mathematical thing is God. And it is from that original abstraction, the Supreme Personality of God, meaning it is not mathematically explained. It's not formulaic. It is from that abstract thing, the personality of Godhead, that the simpler, gross forms of matter are produced. The materialistic scientists think it's the simple and gross forms of matter which produce complex things like consciousness, love, justice, maybe even God. Some claim that God also evolved. But the yoga perspective is different. Everything has its origin in the Supreme. Janmariyasya yatahan vayadi. Janmariyasya yataha. Yeah. So we try to understand this scientifically. Janmariyasya yataha. That everything that exists has its origin in the Supreme Cause, in Krishna. That we have consciousness is because we are part of the Supreme Consciousness, Krishna, not because we are made up of many parts of matter. Many parts of matter have never been shown to create consciousness in any type of laboratory experiment. This is also proven by, these fantasies about sentient computer programming, artificial intelligence. We've mostly given up on that whole matrix idea of computers becoming self-aware. It's just not happening. And that demonstrates there's no combination of matter that causes consciousness. But Janmariyasya yataha, everything that exists has its origin in the Supreme. That we are conscious is because we are part of the Supreme Consciousness. That we feel love, that we desire justice, that we have hope for community. All of these have their origin in the Supreme. The abstract, the non-mathematical, unconditional Supreme Personality of Godhead. From him come the more simpler forms of existence, the simpler forms of matter, the 5 gross material elements, the 3 subtle elements and their combinations, not the other way around. So, manmana bhava mad bhakto, we have to think of Krishna always, madhyajimam namaskaru, always offer our homage, our respect, our love, priya. Then we know that we're not the body. Then we know our origin. Getting over the bodily concept of life means knowing what is our real origin. Darwin staked a claim. He put it in the title of his book, On the Origin of Species. Actually, the full title is not nearly as politically correct. What is it again? It's like On the Origin of Species and basically the conquering of one race over another. The origin of species by means of natural selection or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. That's the full title. Origin of species by means of natural selection and the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. So you can see why that was politically expedient back in 1810 or 1850 or whenever he wrote this. So getting over the bodily concept of life means recognizing our origin. Darwin made a claim. This is our origin. We're from the gunk and the mud and the lizards. But we need to be conscious, constantly and consciously aware of our origin, Krishna. That's how we get over the bodily concept of life, not by means of some extreme yoga practice. That could be helpful, tapasya, asana. That's what we try to teach at our Bhakti Yoga Center. When people come to yoga classes, we tell them this is not just for getting into the body, it's for getting out of the body. So those things can be helpful. But for the devotees, manmana bhava mad bhakta, we try to be consciously aware of Krishna as our origin. Krishna is the cause of our conscious being, the cause of our physical being, the cause of our liberation from the physical being. This is really scientific. And it's coming back also. I'm going to conclude with this because I think we're supposed to stop at 7:45, right? Still Kartik. That it's also coming back in a big way. Believe it or not, a lot of people are in modern academia and in the scientific world, they've hit the brick wall of trying to explain consciousness by means of evolution. And, people are starting to explore other theories, revive old theories also. Cartesian dualism is coming back. Rene Descartes really propounded this idea that the body and the mind must be two separate entities, very different type of energy. That's kind of like back in style. People are talking about that again. And even at Oxford University, the oldest university that we know of, they are publishing papers about panpsychism. Panpsychism, the concept that in some level, consciousness is everywhere. Pan, meaning like it covers everything. That it cannot just be localized in one particular combination of matter, but rather it must be a fundamental principle of the universe. Just like, the four fundamental energies, four fundamental forces. Where is Kalasvarupa? He would know. Anyway, there's like the strong and weak force of the atom. There's electromagnetism and thermodynamics. I think those are the four fundamental energies of the universe. So now at Oxford University, they're also publishing papers arguing that consciousness must be one of them. It cannot be explained with reference to any combination of matter. It must exist in some way everywhere. Just like gravity exists, we don't really perceive it all the time and without the right device. So similarly, consciousness must just exist everywhere. In this way, they're making progress towards an understanding of Paramatma on a scientific level. So Oxford is a prestigious university, so it's hopeful, because obviously people have exhausted their attempts to explain consciousness by means of combination of matter. It's exhausted, and it's not going anywhere. Devotees, we are very fortunate because we know Krishna. We know Krishna. We know that we are originally of the same quality as Krishna. Prabhupada actually says in this first sentence in this purport, according to this explanation, one can clearly understand that originally the living entity was as good as the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his pure spiritual existence. So this is our origin story. We must always be conscious of. Our origin is not some ethnic identity, national identity. Our origin is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Knowing our origin will detach us from infatuation with this material body. Hare Krishna. So I hope that some of these points were interesting, and hope that you feel a little revival of your desire to realize that we're not the body. It's an ongoing process. We'll be hearing it for many, many more years. You're not the body, you're not the body, you're not the body. Someday we might even get it, which would be awesome. But let's continue to try, because there's nothing more revolutionary than this. Nothing more revolutionary than the profound realization that we're not the body. I hope to someday really drive it home in my squishy gray matter. All right, Hare Krishna. I'll just ask if there's any additions or subtractions or some questions or comments or some challenges. You're allowed to disagree with me if you like. Okay, if not.
There's piles of comments, but no time for them.
Oh, I apologize, Prabhu. I lost track of time. I guess then they are doing the Guru Puja now. Is that correct?
As far as I know.
Okay. You please, if you have the time and the energy and the willingness to favor me, you please send me some juicy comments. I always enjoy hearing your feedback, Tarika Prabhu. All right, then Hare Krishna. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi, Hari Hari Bo.
जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद प्रभुपाद जय प्रभुपाद जय श्रीला प्रभुपाद बंधु मोई सावधाना माते जहरा प्रसादे खाय ए भगवतोरिया जाय Krishna Bhakti Govinda Hare Krishna Bhakti Govinda Guru Mukha कृष्णाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामी नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी असत्यादिशतारिणे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेषा शून्यवादी असत्यादिशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Krishna, Krishna
कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
हरे
Hare
राम
Rama,
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Krishna
कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
हरे
Rama,
हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare
Namam Ishvaram Sachidantarupam Lasakundalam Gokule Brajamanam Namam Ishvaram Sachidantarupam Lasakundalam Gokule Brajamanam Yasodeva Viyolukaladamamanam Paramishtamanam Tato Dukadopya Vira Prabho Dukkha Jalavimana
Namo Deva Damodar Ananta Vishnu Pranida Prabho Dukkha Jalavimana
Parishti Vishyati Nandhanu Vihare Shamamanyam Ashivesha
Padeshti Veshati Vinandvatano Gahani Shamamadhyam Virachidasya
Sudevatmadodara Namatadayata Swayamokito Bhakti Rajapitata
Suviratmajo Bhakya Nupevayata Swayamukita Bhakti Bhagavata
Sata Prema Bhakti Swakame Payata Pariya Namoshe Gaho Mesti Damodareha
Tatha Prema Bhakti Japanitayata Namo Chedravo Mesti Damodareha
Namaste Sudame Suradati Dame Pariyodaraya Kave Sasya Dame
Namaste Sudane Sudhati Dane Yogaraya Kavisashanami
Namo Radhikaya Kariya Priyaya Namo Namsaviyaya Devaya Tujam
Namo Radhikaya Chandrakaya Namo Nantavilaya Devaya Pujam
Namo Radhikaya Kariya Priyaya Namo Namsaviyaya Devaya Tujam
Namo Nantavilaya Priyaya Namo Nantavilaya Devaya Pujam
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. To the Supreme Lord, whose form is the embodiment of eternal existence, knowledge, and bliss, whose sharp-shaped earrings are swinging to and fro, who is beautifully shining in the divine one's Gokul, who, due to the infants of breaking his pot of yoga that his mother was churning into butter and then stealing the butter that was kept hanging from his swing, is quickly running from the wooden grinding order in fear of Mother Yashoda, but who has been caught from behind by her, who ran after him with greater speed. To that Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, I offer my humble obeisances.
Upon seeing his mother's lipstick, cried and rubbed his eyes again and again with his lotus hands. His eyes were fearful and his breathing quick, and as Mother Yashoda bound his belly with ropes, he shivered in fright and his fur like mischief. To this Supreme Lord Sri Damodar, who is bound with his devotee's love, I offer my humble obeisances.
Those super excellent Vasai to the Lord Krishna's divinity, down the inhabitants of the Gokula in the pools of ecstasy, to the devotees who are attracted only to his majestic aspect of the Narayana in Vaikuntha. The Lord hearing the ways, I am conquered and overwhelmed by pure loving devotion. To the Supreme Lord Damodar, my obeisances hundreds and hundreds of times.
O Lord, although you are able to give all kind of benediction, I do not pray to you for liberation, nor eternal life in Vaikuntha, nor any other hope. My only prayer is that your childhood pastime may constantly appear in my mind. O Lord, I do not even want to know your features of Paramatma. I simply wish that your childhood pastime may ever be enacted in my heart.
Oh Lord, the cheeks of your blackish lotus face, which is encircled by locks of curling hair, have become red and red bimba fruit with Mother Yashoda's kisses. What more can I describe than this? Millions of opulences are of no use to me, but may this vision constantly remain in my mind.
O unlimited O Master, O Lord, we think that I am drowning in the ocean of sorrow, and I'm almost like a dead end. Please shower telling us nothing, or we uplift me and protects me with your integrity.
My translations are a little different than yours. O Lord Damodar, just as the two sons of Kuvara, Managriva and Nala Kuvara, were delivered from the curse of Narada and made into great devotees by you in the form as a baby, tied with rope to a wooden grinding mortar. In the same way, please give to me your own prema bhakti. I only long for this and have no desire for any kind of liberation.
Lord Damodar, I first of all offer my obeisances to the brilliantly effulgent rose which binds your belly. I then offer my obeisances to your belly, which is the abode of the entire universe. I humbly bow down to your most beloved Srimad Radharani, and I offer all obeisances to you, the Supreme Lord, who displays unlimited pastimes. Shri Shri Damodar ki, Shri Shri Radha Damodar ki.
So last one, we have that translations. I love them. He said that this is, oh Lord, because of stated by Lord, with God and argument, with down to the grow finally to that. If this grow by a family, and then I go to the thing of relation to that. Yeah, so that's the thing, there are some other mistakes everywhere. I don't know.
Sorry? And Cuba, when we were released. I'm just a bit.
Yeah, it's mostly